Have you done many interviews?
Not too many.
Do you mind me asking how old you are, or is that like not the kind of thing you want to say?
Well, I'm 47.
Okay.
Body is 47.
Yeah, you're just a kid.
You're interviewing me too early.
Yeah. Well, I'll be dead by the time it's I'm 72. Okay. So for those I started the stream. Those listening to the live stream of this, if you have a question during it, please go to batgap.com and go to the future interviews menu, and then a few things will pop down, and you'll see one that says questions for guests. So you can submit your question through that. And there's a slim chance that my guest today is in India in the mountains, and there's a slim chance that there'll be a power outage there. And if there is, if it's not restored right away, we might do the second part of this tomorrow, and then at the same time, and then splice them together. So if it gets cut off and we don't come back, that's why. All right, let's start the recording. Okay, I mean, we're going to start. Did you unplug the phone by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Pardon?
Not that anybody ever.
Not that everybody ever calls us, except people wanting to extend our car warranty. That's a thing we get in the US, Mataji, is like these spam things where they want to extend your car warranty. It's totally bogus. All right, yeah, I'm going to start. Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer. Buddha at the Gas Pump is an ongoing series of conversations with spiritually awakening people. We've done well over 600 of them now. And if this is new to you and you'd like to check out previous ones, please go to batgap.com, BATGAP, and look under the past interviews menu. This program is made possible through the support of appreciative listeners and viewers. So if you appreciate it and would like to help support it, there's a PayPal button on the website, and there's a page about alternatives to PayPal. My guest today is Pravrajika Divyanandaprana Mataji. She is a monastic member of Sri Sarada Math, an institution in the lineage of Ramakrishna, Sri Sri Sarada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda. Same lineage as Swami Sarvapriyananda, whom I've interviewed. She is currently editor of the English Journal of Samvit, published from New Delhi. She was principal of Nivedita Vidya Mandir School from 2014 to 2019. She's authored 2 books, Science of Happiness, which I read in the last week or two, and Self-Discovery. In addition to studying the Ramakrishna-Vivekananda literature, she has extensively studied the Yoga-Vedanta texts based on these twin philosophies, which include Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Raja Yoga, the Upanishads, and auxiliary scriptures of Vedanta, along with their commentaries. She has lectured all over India since 2010 in various universities, engineering and medical colleges, and spiritual centers. She offers courses on Yoga-Vedanta every semester at the Indian Institute of Technology in New Delhi. She has also traveled to teach and lecture in South Africa, Ireland, Great Britain, the United Arab Emirates, and Canada, and extensively in the US. And I heard you came to Iowa. Where was I when you did that? I would have gone. She also has trained in the conventional sciences, and some of her talks have explored the interface between subjective and objective sciences. And we were going to do this interview last week, but we had to reschedule. And I'm glad we did, because it gave me an extra week to listen to her talks. I've just been listening to many, many hours of them. And I find I just resonate with this type of knowledge and this tradition also. And it's been really uplifting and blissful, actually, to listen to these beautiful talks, and to also listen to an audio recording of her whole book on happiness. And obviously, an interview like this is just kind of a snapshot, but I will provide links to various video sources of her talks, as her YouTube channel with over 50 hours worth of talks. And if you find that what we covered today resonates with you, I encourage you to listen to more of them. Okay, so thanks so much, Mataji, for joining me here. It's I've really been looking forward to this.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, and you're way up in the Himalayas someplace, which means it's not 115 degrees Fahrenheit where you are, as it is in much of India right now. That's probably why you're there. So, I've been doing this for 12, 13 years now. And when I first started, I encountered what is called Neo-Advaita. And I hadn't been too familiar with it, but I kept running into people and then interviewing some people who might be described as Neo-Advaita teachers or exponents. And I just had a visceral discomfort with that approach as compared to what I feel you represent, which is a much more traditional approach to knowledge and deep experience. And so I just want to start by emphasizing that, in my opinion at least, and we'll get yours, there's a value to these ancient traditions. I mean, maybe sometimes they get calcified or ossified and need a little refreshing, but people have been at this for thousands of years and they've learned a thing or two along the way. And and there are people who say, oh, the guru thing is over, and we don't need all these old crusty traditions. But I think it's a shame if they're just swept aside like that, because there's really a great deal of wisdom to be found in them. So let's take that as a starting point.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, it's so good to know that you feel so intensely about these traditions and the methods they have followed to come at the realization they speak of. In fact, today, very serious sadhaks, even today you will find them sort of trying to follow those in the footsteps of those who have actually realized, because the whole point is, you must have the experience in yourself. And for that, you require to follow a method in a particular ambience. And that can never be discounted. Like, you can't compromise on that. And that's the whole point about sadhana. So I think those who are very particular about getting the spiritual experience will definitely stick to the method.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things the Neo-Advaitins say are things that are true on some level, but they're not actually that practical for the average person. For instance, they'll say, you're already enlightened, or there is no person, so why should you do anything? Because you're just going to reinforce the sense of a doer if you do something for this enlightenment thing, which you already are, and things like that. And so on some level, I mean, if we read Mandukya Upanishad or something, yeah, that's the way they talk, but it's not a practical approach for the average person. And I know that you said in one of your talks that the vast majority of people really need to start with karma yoga and go through a great degree of refinement and purification before knowledge alone can be the springboard to realization.
Right. Yeah, it's essentially about transformation of consciousness. And until that has occurred, I think just one single thought or thought process even, it cannot lead you to the actual thing. It's a matter of transformation of consciousness. And in India, when we use the word consciousness, it includes, it means something more than a kind of thought or emotion or an act of will, intention. It means something more than that. It means it's a complete transformation of your awareness. That awareness which was invested in a thought process, in a mind, in a body consciousness, that has been transcended. Without this happening in the first person, as I always say, without it happening in yourself, it's very difficult to actually digest a philosophy like Advaita.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, you know what I was gonna, I was gonna have you do a little chant at the beginning that might traditionally be done at the beginning of something like this, and I forgot. I want to do one now.
Yeah, sure.
Like Asato, Ma or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Why don't
Yes,
you do
sure.
that?
I can do it. Yeah.
Do that.
Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Oh, thank you so much for suggesting this. I just love these chants.
I'm sorry that I forgot to do it in the beginning. What does that mean?
Well, from Asat, you lead me to Sat. From the unreal, lead me to the real. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya is lead me from darkness to light. And Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya is lead me from this mortality to immortality.
Nice. Okay, so I was just about to ask you about Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, and because it relates to what we were just saying, I think. So start explaining what those mean, and we'll discuss them a little bit.
Right. These are the three standard techniques we use in Vedanta, and like Shravan, obviously, to know something about the subject matter is very much required initially. And
so Shravana is like an initial hearing of something. You like,
yeah, it's
right now
hearing.
people are listening to our talk, and that's a kind of a Shravana.
Yes. And actually, Shravana can be very powerful because you are generating the mental vrittis regarding the subject matter. And
vrittis are
conscious modifications of your thought process.
Impressions. Yes.
Well, they become impressions, but initially they are like a modification of your mind. Vritti comes from vrit dhatu, which is a whirl of thought, as it were. So it's a kind of modification of the mind. When you repeat it, it becomes a sanskar, an impression.
Okay, good. Yeah, so everything then that we perceive is a vritti, you could say. If we're walking down the street, we see a telephone pole, we see a dog, we see a car. Those are all little vrittis.
Yeah. From the subjective standpoint, it's a vritti, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then obviously, every vritti, especially those we repeat over and over and over again, makes an impression.
Right.
Okay.
So it's an easy way to create sanskars for the Vedantic life. Shravan.
And I used to have the impression that samskara had a negative connotation, like it was a stress or
not
conditioning. But obviously, yeah. Now, especially I learned this listening to you, that it's as positive as it is negative. It depends on what they are.
Yeah, exactly. There are many types of sanskars, and depending on the quality of your conscious thought process, they are generated. So they can be positive and negative, right?
Right. And so we want to create positive ones, obviously, to counterbalance and displace the negative ones.
Right, right.
Good. And as with any kind of conditioning, the more impressions of a certain kind we have, the more inclined we are to do a certain thing,
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And so we want our inclinations to be more and more positive and healthy and constructive. So therefore we keep creating positive impressions.
Yeah. Actually, sanskars in the spiritual traditions, especially here, they are looked upon as the building blocks of character and behavior. So they are the most important things about your spiritual life, the impressions you create as a result of your conscious thought and action.
So
go
ahead.
Those building blocks actually manifest as behavioral patterns. So even today's behavioral psychology is not insisting on this, but this is so much a fact that your sort of the building blocks are already within you based upon what you have thought in the past, and accordingly you act in any particular situation, or you react, or whatever manifestation of behavior is there. So it's all dependent on the sanskar.
Yeah, I used to have a teacher who used to often say, that to which we give our attention grows stronger in our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So obviously, let's say parents raising a child, they are trying to instill positive samskaras or impressions in that child, because that builds the child's character.
Right. Right. So the
Okay.
whole key is the conscious thought pattern.
Mm-hmm.
You know, conscious thought becomes, when repeated, it becomes sanskar.
Right.
So we ought to pay attention to that, what we are doing with a conscious mind.
Yeah. Good. And this might seem obvious, but
Yeah.
a lot of times people who are interested in spirituality or show an interest in it, they still, I mean, I'm guilty of this myself, I suppose, because I like to watch the news and see what's going on in the world, and that's usually not very positive. But very often people indulge in things that have no redeeming value and somehow feel they can get away with it. But these things have consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like on the laptop you want to erase something, you just have to touch some particular button, but it's not so with your mind. Whatever gets imprinted there, it takes time to erase that, and that's why many people are actually frightened of their memories.
Yeah.
They have generated sanskars which are very strong and negative, and so they are scared of their memories, because sanskars again produce memories. And that's why the whole thing, the whole cycle, and this is very well described in the commentaries on the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. This entire cycle can be controlled if you take charge of your conscious thought process. You allow only positive, good thought. That's why the importance of Shravan and Manan. You see, you encourage the right form of thinking, it will become your sanskar. It will generate your memories further on, and the cycle gets repeated.
So what's the difference between Shravana and Manana?
Manan is when you think deeply about what you have heard. When you have generated a certain level of vritti jnana through Shravan, the knowledge born of, the modifications generated by hearing the Vedantic scripture, then you dwell upon that. You dwell upon that for a long time. And it's the best thing. The next best thing to realization will be to dwell upon the experience of the realized sage.
Okay.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So for instance, over the last couple of weeks, I've probably listened to 20 hours of your talks. And I don't know if there was anything that I heard that I had never heard before, but my feeling was I could hear this stuff every day for the rest of my life. And it would still have a positive influence. I mean, because a lot of it tends to go in one ear and out the other, and you just want to have it, get more and more deeply ingrained, so it becomes second nature.
Right. That's why the importance of Manan, thinking continuously about what we have heard.
Yeah.
Especially about, the news, you don't want to think continuously about what you have heard on the news channel, isn't it? But a scripture, you require to hear it again and again and dwell upon it, so that you generate enough sanskars to support your practice further. That is the nididhyasana, the third step. Conforming the mental mode to reality. That will only come when you have generated enough sanskars to support the practice and get the experience through meditation.
Yeah. And you can take a book like the Bhagavad Gita or something and read it throughout your life, but it's always a new book, because there's always a sort of a deeper level of understanding as you go along.
That's right.
Yeah.
Even the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is like that. Every time you feel it's something new.
Okay. And then there's nididhyasana, and talk about that a bit.
Yeah, that is about meditation. See, although we may love to get the direct insight into the state of pure consciousness, whatever the scriptures are speaking of, you have to learn to conform the mental mode to that reality before you can actually get the plunge into that experience. I use the word experience. There are people who use the word insight or breakthrough or whatever you call it. Before you get it, your mind should have completely absorbed that experience, or have a very, very clear idea of that experience within yourself, and you love to dwell on it. If this sanskar is not there, tell me how on earth will you actually remain in that very rarefied state of awareness? That is why meditation is so very important. It is conforming the mental mode, the nature of your mind to the nature of reality. This will only come through practice.
Right. So for instance, you could read books about pure consciousness. You could read Nisargadatta Maharaj. You could read Ramana
Right.
Maharshi and so on. But that's like, well, it's like standing outside a restaurant, reading the menu on the door and think,
right.
oh, that sounds very delicious. But you could starve to death doing that. You have to kind of
Right.
go in and eat, so to speak. You have to
You're
sit
right.
and meditate to experience it.
Yeah. So beautifully put. That's right.
Yeah. And actually, this would be a good point to mention the second and third verses of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. I think that kind of relates directly to what we're talking about when we say experience and the mechanics of how that experience is achieved.
That's right. Because after the second sutra of the Yoga Sutras, there he introduces to us the definition of yoga. Yogastu chittavritti nirodh. So why the cessation of the thought process is important? Because if you don't do that, tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam, so that your witnessing awareness comes to the forefront, your identification with the thought process goes to the background. You sort of undermine that by disconnecting from thought itself, so that awareness comes into full bloom. That's the whole point. Because in yoga psychology, how do they exactly see awareness? It is the undercurrent of your thought process. It is what enlivens thought. So you have to put down thought in order to step into awareness. Otherwise, what will happen? Vritti sarupyam itaratra, which means otherwise you will simply keep getting identified with the thought process again and again and get carried away by it, which is what happens during meditation. Please see. During meditation, maybe you attain a certain amount of deep calmness or stillness, but then something else comes into your mind and it just carries you away for momentarily. Then again, you come back. So this is the natural process unless the witnessing awareness has come to the forefront. That is why the standard technique in yoga is you put down the thought process. That is yoga, essentially. But to what effect? So that you become more aware from within. Not that you go into sleep or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the analogy often used is that of a movie theater where the movie is playing on the screen. You can't see the screen because the movie overshadows it. But if you could take the movie image and make it fainter and fainter and fainter and fainter, then as you did so, the screen would become more and more and more obvious until eventually
right.
no movie projecting on it and screen is right there, bright.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In actual experience, it translates as becoming deeply aware or conscious, so conscious that you don't feel like you are the awareness or anything like that. You just become intensely aware. So that is a tremendous experience, actually, to achieve that.
And there's still something dualistic in saying you become intensely aware. And obviously, what we're talking about here is a state at which one actually transcends dualism.
Yes, exactly. Because in that state, when you are fully aware, there is no question of, see, you are unidentified with any thought process. So there is no identification with a body or a world of objects. So there's no duality, basically. The state of intense awareness guarantees this. But for that, you must have the sufficient clarity of mind to maintain that for a long time, because it is a rarefied state from the normal standpoint.
Yeah.
But it makes everything very clear. Without nididhyasana, in fact, you can't understand Vedanta.
And maintaining it for a long time, that's something which grows through practice, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It should not be just a few prolonged seconds. It should be the real samadhi-like state.
Right.
That is the most important thing.
Yeah. And the nervous system has to be cultured over time, the mind and nervous system. Yeah.
That's why without the sanskar backup, you actually can't do it.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. So Here's a question that I wrote out in a little bit of detail. So the Gita says that there's nothing so purifying as knowledge. And that might be interpreted to mean that you can just study, read, and discuss various scriptures and thereby be purified and enlightened. Some people dismiss the importance of practice. We're rehashing a little bit here. They dismiss the importance of practice and suggest that it reinforces the sense of an ego or a practicer, but you and others emphasize practice to gain clarity and purity. But when you're practicing, meditating, you're not gaining knowledge in an intellectual or informational sense. You're just allowing the mind to settle down to a quiet state. And yet when it totally settles down, you might say you've arrived at a state of pure knowledge or pure realization, that to which intellectual understanding points. So that's more of a statement than a question, but it kind of summarizes what we just said. And perhaps you could elaborate on it a little bit more.
Yeah, we use the word knowledge because we don't have a better word. In Sanskrit, we have other words, like we have Samvit, we have Prajna. What these mean to say is, you see, here knowledge is more to do with awareness than any kind of an objective encounter with anything. It is not knowing something. In the final analysis, you can only be the thing, you cannot know it. So it's not a process of knowledge. But we don't have another word in English, so we keep using the word knowledge. If
like
we were having this conversation in Sanskrit, we would have used quite different words, because it is actually, you cannot know the self. You can only become the self because it's your own awareness that you're investigating into. You can only be it. That's why Vivekananda used the words, I think, being and becoming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you could stand apart from the self and know it, like who is knowing what? I mean,
exactly.
It's like Eckhart Tolle said on just before he had his awakening, he was very depressed and he said, I can't live with myself anymore. And then he said, wait a minute, are there two of me?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, they say that the Inuits or the Eskimos have about 30 different names for snow because they're so familiar with snow. So the Vedic tradition has a lot of different names for consciousness and knowledge and all that.
Yeah, we actually, the word Prajna, Chaitanya, these are all very significant because we know here the knowledge is to do with intensified awareness. You can say the level of your awareness is dependent on the density of your mind. Actually.
The density?
Yeah, of your mind. If the mind is very clear, very sattvic, then it will reflect more of what we are calling the Sakshi, the pure consciousness. So your reflected awareness will be very intense. So that is a huge clue to getting to the state of your original being. Unless you manufacture that state, you see, that's why Nididhyasana, unless you manufacture that state, you won't get an inkling of what you're searching for and what its nature is. Well, this is, there are two schools of Vedanta. One actually insists on Shravan as the direct means to realization, and the other insists on Nididhyasana. I belong to the second school. That's actually Bhamati school.
Yeah. And obviously you include Shravana. You include the hearing of truth.
Yes, that's the first
just
step,
part of the package. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I was listening to your discourses on the Isha Upanishad, and there's a verse that I've always wondered about that you discussed, and this relates to what we're just talking about. Into blinding darkness goes he who worships avidya, ignorance. Into even greater darkness goes he who worships vidya, knowledge. And and that's, I've always wondered about that verse. It sounds, what are they talking about? I have a thought about it, but let me hear what you discuss it for a second.
See, this is pretty obvious. This is the characteristic Upanishadic way of putting it, that since it is not an objective knowledge, anything even the spoken word, the written word, anything in the third person will never give you an inkling of what it is. And that is why this Vidya will lead you into greater darkness. That's why they're saying that. Because it's not an objective knowledge at all. The very nature of that knowledge and the method changes when it comes to self-knowledge. Meditation is the most direct way you can go into it. And for those who are adepts at meditation, real yogis, maybe just the Mahavakya suffices. Yes, for them, it's just like a spark, they get it immediately.
Explain Mahavakya.
Mahavakyas are those great statements or sentences in the Upanishads which give you the direct relationship between the Atman and Brahman, the self and the cosmic reality of existence. They all mean the same, actually. There are 4 Mahavakyas, and we were just recently doing the Mandukya Upanishad. It has the Mahavakya Ayamatma Brahma, which means this Atman itself is Brahman. Chandogya Upanishad has Tattvamasi, you are verily that Brahman. See, they all mean the same thing. And Brihadaranyaka has Aham Brahmasmi, which is I am Brahman. And Aitareya Upanishad has Prajnanam Brahma, which is consciousness is Brahman. So these 4 statements are directly pointing, in fact, they alone suffice to a very developed mind. They are just great pointers towards the state of pure being, your own real nature.
So in other words, if the mind is pure enough, ripe enough, one can just hear a phrase like that, and that can
drive you in straight. Yeah,
right. Whereas someone else could hear it for years on end, and it just wouldn't have much effect.
That's the point I'm trying to make. That the mind has to be cultivated by the meditation process. That is why I speak more about yoga many times than about Vedanta, because you must perfect the methodology, and then the end will come by itself.
Yeah. Another angle on that Isha Upanishad verse is, he who worships knowledge goes into even greater darkness. I wonder if it might be something I've encountered many times, which is actually described by an old Tibetan proverb, which is that don't mistake understanding for realization, and don't mistake realization for liberation. But yet a lot of times people read enough books or go to enough talks they think, I got it, and that's worse than thinking you don't have it, because you don't, and yet you think you do, and therefore you're not going to do the necessary things to actually get it.
Yeah, you're right. In fact, in the Upanishads, you have this sa atma sa vigneya. Sagneya, they are not telling you, they are telling vigneya, which means you have to realize it. It's about being and becoming, and not knowing it as an object. Just for want of words, we are constantly using the word object. There is a very we're using the word knowledge, but it's about being and becoming. That's how you can describe it. And I can tell you this, that people who have actually done a lot of meditation, they will understand the significance of this yogic statement, yogo yogena jnatavyo yogo yoga pravartate, which means you can know yoga only through yoga. And by yoga, I mean meditation, not the exercises and all that.
Right.
You can know it only through yoga, and you can proceed it in yoga only through yoga, and not in any other way. Because the intelligence that develops as a result of stilling thought is something very different from the intelligence you get by collecting information through a thought process.
Which can actually
which is actually delusive.
Yeah.
You remember, I think you have read a lot of Ramana literature.
A fair amount. I mean, not.
Yeah, a fair amount. So I think you remember that incident where there was this person sitting at the feet of Ramana, and he said, Bhagwan, I don't want to become sugar. I want to eat sugar. And then immediately, Maharshi looked into his eyes and said, do you think awareness is insentient like sugar, that you have to remain apart from it to enjoy it? Now, this is a stupendous point, because you see that he's Bhagwan. He has realized that state. He's in that state. It's not a separate, you have to keep it separate from you to enjoy it. The very nature of pure awareness is it is synonymous with happiness. You will not realize it until you enter the state.
I have some questions about that. I've been thinking about that lately. I've been studying the Katha Upanishad with Swami Sarvapriyananda, and we were doing one verse where it says, or one mantra where it says the discriminating man should merge the organ of speech into the mind. He should merge that mind into the intelligent self. He should merge the intelligent self into the great soul. He should merge the great soul into the peaceful self. And Swami Sarvapriyananda talked about this as a recognition that they are already merged, the way New York City is merged into New York State, which is merged into the United States, which is merged into North America, et cetera. But so he's saying one recognizes that they're already merged, but then who or what is doing the recognizing, and does that recognizer have to remain ever so slightly unmerged or separate to some degree in order to be observing these mergings?
See, in the final, from the final perspective, yes, they are merged. But just now we are recognizing them as separate. That's why we are saying speech and mind and self. We are using different terms. So from the beginner's standpoint, I would put it like this, that what's the meaning of merging speech and mind? See, if you just arrest speech, you become mentally very active, isn't it? This is our natural experience. So if you arrest the thought process, you become deeply aware. So this is the meaning of merge speech into mind and mind into self. What they're asking us to do is, see, these are all faculties given for the expression of that inner consciousness. Now, your goal is not the expression, but the knowledge of the self itself. So what will you do? So merge speech into mind, which means arrest still your different faculties of expression. Your mind will become very active. Then just suppress that intelligence also, and you will become deeply aware. Because you see, this is what happens in the meditation process. When you actually put down thought in a very conscious state of mind, you become intensely aware of the absence of thought in your mind. Now, this state is to be extended, captured and extended. It will resolve into a very clarified state of, you can say, pure awareness. It is still, it's still in the mind, it's reflected awareness, but it will give you an inkling of what you are searching for, the state of pure being, the Atman. So you have to arrest this, the instrumentation, in order to allow that to happen. Otherwise, you'll be carried away by your thoughts, by your sense perceptions. They are all meant to turn us outward, and they are meant for our survival, okay? But once that is taken care of, we must get this, it's an inner imperative that you want to turn your senses and mind inward. Because you know the sheer limitation of sense experience and mind-born experience. That's why I wrote that Science of Happiness. You see, we are all searching for the same thing. Only thing is, we have not explored this inner realm sufficiently, and we have not brought the terminology into everyday thinking and speaking. We haven't done that. It's somewhere in the scriptures and esoteric and all that, and only a few people have access to it. It should not be like that. Vivekananda had wanted that Advaita become poetic, come into everyday life. All this you must have read in his works. So because why he wanted that was, this should be knowledge available to anyone who is prepared for it, who's wanting it.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know about India, but here in the United States, there's a very high rate of depression, and everybody's taking medications for it. There's a very high rate of suicide, especially among younger people. And it's tragic, especially considering that everyone contains deep within an ocean of happiness. Yet there's all this unhappiness, resulting in such tragic behaviors.
Well, I always tell my students in these IITs and all that, you just keep this equation in your mind, that happiness is an exponential function of awareness. If your mind is not deeply aware, no object will keep you happy for a long time. Because the mind will fill up with boredom and then worries and anxieties and all sorts of things if it is not deeply aware. Don't think collection of information and a variegated thought process is all that constitutes intelligence. In fact, it compromises your real intelligence, because the more you allow the mind to overthink and purely just objective thinking, the more you discount awareness. You compromise on awareness, because your thought, as yoga sees it, it is nothing but a huge investiture of your vital energy. So you are deeply engaged now in a thought process which is outward bound. You will lose on awareness, and the mind which is not deeply aware will not know happiness.
Right. And the reason for that, obviously, is, well, maybe not obviously, is that happiness or bliss is an intrinsic quality of consciousness or awareness, Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. So what the Vedic scriptures say is that, awareness is not only your innermost nature, but it's also the fundamental reality of the universe. And bliss or happiness is somehow, part of its makeup.
That's
part
right.
of its
Yeah.
Why would that be? Why is it that happiness is, if there were no, let's say 10 minutes after the Big Bang, when there were no life forms of any sort in the universe, even then, would you say that happiness was an essential constituent or quality of Brahman? And Brahman it just took a few billion years for there to be beings who could enjoy that as a living reality, but still it was there from the start, or for all times.
See, you must understand this thing in the first person again.
Mm-hmm.
Just check on your own awareness and see, is it apart from existence and happiness? It cannot be. Your own awareness, these are synonyms for that awareness only. What we are calling pure existence and happiness, they are different definitions, different words for awareness only. And that is why Brahman is always called Satchidananda. But you must realize it as your awareness, in your being. Because if I understand Brahman as Satchidananda, what does it matter to me? You must experience it as I am that Brahman. In my awareness, actually speaking, there is nothing called my awareness, because awareness is not mine. I am awareness. So through meditation, when you become deeply aware, this is all I can say about it, that when you become intensely aware, which means your mind is bereft of thought, but intensely aware. Awareness floods the mind. You will understand that means happiness. And every other form of happiness, which was object-based, was a kind of synthetic joy, which, the mind had to be engaged with something and somehow get a little joy or gladness. And that is why you were doing that kind of an engagement. But this is the original joy of pure being. But you can know it only if your awareness gets clarified to that extent, and not by any other means. Even the Upanishad, I'm telling you, or a great Rishi, or Swami Vivekananda sitting in front of you, or Raman Maharshi sitting in front of you. But it must happen in you. Your awareness should touch pure being. Just now, when we are talking of awareness, we are talking of the reflected shadow of pure being in the mind. And to the extent we clear the mind, the more we become aware. So, you follow that method, but there must come a point when you see the source as it is. You don't see it, you be it, you become it, because you were always that.
And of course, if you could sit in the presence of, Ramana Maharshi,
you sit in their presence and they will do it for you.
It's contagious.
That is there. That's there.
Yeah.
But it should happen in you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there are still debates, and probably will be for a long time, in scientific and even spiritual circles as to whether consciousness is fundamental and everything
Right.
arises from that, or it's just a product of the brain. And if you're
Right,
experiencing
yeah.
bliss in meditation, maybe it's just because the process is somehow triggering these neurochemicals and so on. And it's
Right.
not an intrinsic quality of consciousness and blah, blah, blah. You know, we could go on and on with that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
That's right.
But yeah.
Yeah, my students also keep telling me all that, but I tell them, see, now you are asking for the experience of pure being, then you must practice meditation. If you try to understand spirituality without the power of meditation, you will only depend on a refined thought process, isn't it? And that can be, your thought is affected by so many factors. Your sense impressions actually create a lot of your thought process. Your memories impinge on that. And so it's a lot of collected information. This is what I want to say. You can only know when you plunge into the source. Otherwise, it's a recycling of all the data you have collected in various ways over a long period of time. How will that yield this knowledge?
Yeah.
Raman Maharshi used to characteristically say, no thought is consistent with realization. And he would say, you can only realize the self through Mritu Manas, the dead mind. Vivekananda at one point in his life said, I simply want to forget everything that I have known. Just before he attained the Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, that was his state of mind. This is obvious to a sadhak that you have to jerk the mind. You have to sort of clean it, purify it of everything, so that the actual foundation of your thought process, that which enlivens your thought, comes to the forefront. This is the whole thing about sadhana, which I sometimes I feel it's strange why this is not insisted upon.
By whom?
By a whole lot of spiritual practitioners do not believe that somewhere you have to undermine thought and bring awareness to the forefront. You see, in your conscious mind, this has to happen.
If they are spiritual practitioners and they don't believe that, then what are they doing? What do they believe?
I don't know. In fact, you find me here just now in the Himalayas because, every year I run and come to this place, and whenever I can, I try to be here. And all that I do is sit here, there's pin drop silence. Rick, you should actually just experience this. It's so marvelous. It's absolutely silent. And if you sit anywhere here in the Himalayas and just, first of all, you just hear the silence and ask yourself, who is it who's hearing? That's enough to take you into what we are meaning by awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in some situations like that where it's very silent and pure and everything. It's just very conducive to, yeah. Well, based on what you're just saying, a question came in from, actually, let me do this one first, from Rahul Agarwal in New Delhi. How long does a person like you, after coming out of Samadhi, remember calendar dates and linear time to continue worldly activities? And I'll rephrase this question slightly, and in that you were just quoting Ramana Maharshi as saying, Mrityu Manas, dead mind. And that wouldn't sound appealing to the average person because they'd say, wait a minute, I have responsibilities and things. I can't get into some blank state that I can't get out of. My children will starve or whatever. But I think the whole point of, there's the Gita, Yoga Kuru Karmani.
Right.
Be established in being, but integrate it so that you can perform action from that foundation, on that foundation.
Exactly. Actually speaking, that state does not take you away from life or activity, because what happens is there's a function between your vital energy and awareness. If you experience the state of very clarified, pure awareness, your vital energy is always at its optimum. So you will always be a lot of energy in your system. See, I have given those indices of happiness. I don't know if you saw that video.
I think I did.
One
and
of the indices of this state is very high energy output,
right.
both physically and mentally. So you're mentally clear and always aware and full of energy, and physically also. And it also caters to all the, problems of the body, or the kind of compulsions of the mind. It caters to all that, this state. It doesn't take you away from life. In fact, it takes you deeply into real life. And whatever you do, you'll do it better once you have experienced this state. I simply can't understand how we have got that idea that these things take you away from life. They take you deep into life.
Well, I think it's, to a certain extent, it's a matter of one's dharma. I mean, you look at somebody like Ramana Maharshi and you think, whoa, he must be in a very wonderful subjective state, but I wouldn't want to sit around on a couch for 30, 40 years in a loincloth. I have inspirations and aspirations to do other things, which the average person does. And so I think it's important to always mention that one can achieve a very elevated state and yet be engaged in activity.
Yeah, you can take Vivekananda as an example, or Sri Ramakrishna himself. Well, they did so much of great work after having realized that state. So it's not like a dead end. Actually, people try to interpret that state without reaching it. And that's why they come to these kind of conclusions that, well, it's a state of blankness. It's not a state of blankness at all. It is a state of full awareness, due to which everything, whatever you call yourself, gets rejuvenated.
Yeah. And there are, we've mentioned some good examples. Mata Amritananda Mai is another one. Right. I've spent a lot of time around her. Her daily routine would kill the average person within about a week. The amount of time she spends doing stuff. And yet when you get close to her and you really sort of tune into where she's at, she's in a very profound, deep state, but it's completely compatible with incredibly dynamic activity.
Look at that. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I think this is a very wrong idea that that kind of absorption causes you to be away from ordinary activity. Yeah. It enhances life spectacularly, in fact.
Right. All right. Well, I think we've covered that point. I mean, so, there are some rare individuals who are going to be very reclusive and withdrawn, but it's not the average person. And therefore, this is available for everybody in the context of their natural inclinations and dharma.
Right.
All righty. Well, let me just throw a question in here that someone asked that I don't know if it'll be a bit of an abrupt segue, and then we'll get back to some other things. This is from Kanta Dadlani in Mumbai. Why do some people experience negative reactions from others, even complete strangers? I'm not sure exactly what she's asking, but I think you can make something of that.
Well, why do you experience negative reactions? I think I can give you a solution to that. I can't tell you why people are reacting like that around you. You must develop a kind of kavach, what is called a kind of shield, by being very positive yourself. You can watch the video on positive thinking. For most people, that is the level of spirituality they want. That's why we created that video. All they want is the effect of a good mind. And if you continuously think positively and think well of others and have what is called goodwill towards everyone, the energies you attract will be only good around you. So then you won't have to bother so much about negative people around you. There are toxic people. I'm not saying that it's not there, but you will not draw them into your ambit. That I can tell you.
Yeah.
So it depends entirely on the kind of energy you radiate.
Also, we can think of examples of saintly people who were attacked or criticized in various ways, and like Jesus saying, "Forgive them, Father; they know not what they do." Right. He wasn't saying, "Oh, these terrible people,"
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Some guy wrote a very negative book about Ramana Maharshi, and he said, "Oh, put it at the entrance to the ashram, make it freely available to everybody."
That's right. And Vivekananda, the kind of criticisms he received and the way he dealt with them, well, you should actually read those stories. And they are very inspiring, because if you have a spiritual outlook and if you have spiritual experience, then I think no negativity can come close to you. That's the power of the spirit. You surely won't give in to negative vibrations and all that, because you have that shield around you.
There's
It's
something
a shield born of thought. It's your aura.
There's something in physics called the Meissner effect, where a superconductor or superfluid, something that is extremely coherent within itself, is impervious to incoherent influences coming at it from the outside.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit for a while about, and feel free as we're going along, if an idea comes to mind that you'd like to pursue, just bring it up. Don't wait for me to ask questions about it. Just launch into something if you like. Anything right at the moment, or shall I continue?
No, please continue.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about ethics. You gave some talks about the yamas and niyamas as being foundational for spiritual practice. And there was a nice quote from Vivekananda that you mentioned, that the infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, if I got that right.
That's right.
Let's see. Go ahead. Swami Sarvapriyananda also talks about, he has sometimes says, you can have ethics without enlightenment, but you can't have enlightenment without ethics.
That's right.
And he emphasizes that it's quite foundational and even preliminary in traditional spiritual paths. It's true of Buddhism also.
Yes. Yes, that's pretty obvious, because if you, what does it do to you in your system from the yogic standpoint? It actually conserves your vital energy. You can't afford to compromise on your vital energies, because that is going to lead you to your experience of realization. And an ethical life conserves all your energies, and most of all, the mental modes required for the higher life can come only with a very strong ethical foundation. In fact, without that, you're sure to fail in yoga. So that's why some of my IIT students asked me this, that why should I be good? So I tell them, because that's the only way you can control your mind. You can have a stable mind and a stable life. Otherwise, your own vital energies will systematically destroy you.
Yeah. I bring this up because I've seen, I'm in touch with so many people in the spiritual world, and I've seen examples of this where people are literally destroyed, who seem to start out pretty good, but somehow neglected this thing. And
exactly.
I gave a talk on this at a conference a few years ago, and then with some friends, we founded this organization called the Association for Spiritual Integrity. And there are examples of people who just seem to feel that they've attained some state of consciousness and they can do whatever they want, and it's just God doing it. And they indulge in all kinds of, drugs and sex and all kinds of things, and end up getting into literally destroying themselves and becoming extremely toxic, and then hurting a lot of people in the process. So it's a shame, because spirituality is such a glorious undertaking, and it's so important for the world, and it's so hurtful and disillusioning to people when they get caught up in something like this.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, if you read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the master's insistence on purifying the mind and keeping it away from what he would call woman and gold. You see, this is so central to the spiritual life, because as long as that consciousness is there, body consciousness will remain. And then how will you explore into pure consciousness if you are already identified with something? So that is so fundamental that that's why yam and niyam, if we can practice that for a long time, yoga will happen by itself. A sattvic life is most important for spiritual practice.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you can't have a family. We have to keep saying this. But it doesn't mean you can't have a family life and have a job that earns you a good living and so on and so forth. But there's a certain balance or proportion
That's
to things.
right. That's right. That's right.
Like in the Vedic tradition, you have people like King Janaka and so on who were wealthy.
That's
and,
right. Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one question on this that I was listening to your talk the other day, and you said our perception of right and wrong comes from the mind. And then I wondered, well, aren't there any more universal values of ethics? Because if it just comes from the mind, then it's totally relative, and one person's right might be another person's wrong, and then anything goes. So I'm not sure what you meant by that, but I do you feel?
Maybe that I said that contextually, but I do believe, yes, there is a universal set of you can say values which are mandatory to human life, and that's what constitutes rhythm in the in Vedic parlance. You know, that which brings harmony into life.
Rhythm, R-I-T-A-M.
Yes, that's right. So they are nothing but a code of universal laws and values which are mandatory. You have to follow them.
Rhythm bar pragya, that's in Patanjali, isn't it?
No, that's a different idea.
Oh, okay.
This rhythm in the Vedas is the essential rhythm of life, you can say, which is harmony, which comes through the spirit of yajna, which means the spirit of exchange and understanding that the nature of life is a healthy exchange between the internal and the external, participating in universal life, which means giving of yourself, unselfish action, you can say, and working for the good of all, service mindedness. You can translate it in all these ways. But the essential thing is a harmony between the individual and the cosmos. Without this, again, your vital energies will not remain harmonious, and no higher spiritual experience is possible.
So what we're saying here is not that people should be here in the United States, we have fundamentalist religious people who are very moralistic and very strict and always, criticizing those who aren't like them and so on and so forth. And then they usually are exposed in some kind of scandals. Turns out they were not practicing what they were preaching. So we're not, when we say ethics, sometimes it brings that kind of thing to mind, kind of goody two shoes, moralistic, repressive kind of thing. But I think the context in which we want to frame this is just that this mind-body system that is our vehicle through life. And there are certain things which enhance its functioning and make the journey smoother. And there are certain things which damage it. Like if you put dirt in your gas tank on your car, it's not going to perform very well. So you just need to take care of this mechanism. And
that's right.
Yeah. That was a realization I had when I was about 18 and decided I'd better stop taking drugs. Back in the 60s. What are the kleshas?
The kleshas are actually the afflictions which the human mind suffers from. So in they are generalized in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras as being fivefold. The first klesha is avidya, which is supposed to be the actual root, the cause for the other kleshas, which is ignorance of the Purusha, the real nature of our being. And then from that arises asmita, which means a wrong idea of yourself. A sense of yourself which is not based on the reality of your being. And I think all of us have that asmita. We have a sense of I am, but it's identified with something of the body and mind and not with the source. So that's asmita. And then as a result, you have rag, dvesh, and abhinivesh, which are attachment, aversion, and false fears. So this is pretty obvious. These are all the kleshas, the afflictions due to which our mind goes into states of negativity, and we feel a sense of moroseness or the people are planning getaways all the time. Even a whole lot of tourists have just now come here to this Pangot because they just want to keep away from their mind, which is so wrongly conditioned by the kleshas.
Yeah, it's also 115 degrees Fahrenheit in much of India right now.
Yes. Delhi is just sizzling in the heat. Almost it's for 45, 46 degrees. So that's an additionally physical klesha, you can say. So all this keep the mind and the body very unhappy, due to which we are seeking for a whole lot of other experiences. So people don't actually work on the getting rid of kleshas. They only try to divert their mind to something else to escape these afflictions. That's the problem.
And so is getting rid of them, just doing spiritual practice as we've already described, or is there more to it?
Yeah, there is a definite way. And in fact, Patanjali's Ashtang Yoga is the means to get rid of kleshas. That is how he puts it. So Ashtang Yoga was actually calibrated to put an end to mental afflictions, which are due to all these factors. But, in order to succeed in this, you must see these afflictions for what they are and not, superimpose them on factors outside of yourself. Like we usually do this when we have anger in our head, it's due to that person or due to that circumstance happening like that. We do that. And we don't recognize the enormous effect of avidya in our mind. I don't know who I am, and I'm very happy to remain identified with what I am not, and also a big ego about it. Oh, this is a huge problem. But we don't see it like that. That's why we don't recognize the afflictions, these kleshas. And that's why Ashtang Yoga, then the solution doesn't appear very impressive to us. Only one who has felt, the actual misery of being ignorant about my own being will start the spiritual journey rightly, isn't it? If I'm very happy being what I'm not, and very satisfied with an ego which is baseless, and identified with a whole lot of things which are so temporary, then how will I be serious on my spiritual journey? Tell me. You must feel the sheer sorrow of not knowing who we are fundamentally. Everything begins from there.
Yeah, it would be nice if society were structured and education were structured such that one came to that realization in the normal course of their development as a child, as it is,
That's right.
Most people never come to it. And those who do often have to go through a lot of difficulties before they do.
Yes, because they have trapped themselves in so many ways. And the mind is so deeply conditioned in so many negative patterns that compulsive behaviors they are sort of trapped in their own minds.
I mean, here in the West, it's not really part of the culture. And there in India, I mean, is it any better? I mean, do people just sort of...
Not in urban India, I wouldn't say it's any better. But I have seen this, the insistence on developing good sanskars is there in many pockets of India. In Indian traditional families, in fact, they talk this language. Almost all of our local languages, the native languages of India, have the word sanskar, that this inner impressions have to be purified and cleansed and deliberately made such that your life is tuned towards higher values. And you don't compromise vital energy on silly thought and all kinds of emotions. And because, it's a huge trap.
Yeah. And, there's a practical significance to it too. I've often heard this Indian phrase, the means collect around sattva. Do you know the Sanskrit of that?
The means collect around sattva.
Yeah. Isn't there a Sanskrit? It's a famous saying, isn't it? But anyway, I mean, to me, what that means is, not only for the sake of spiritual practice, but for the sake of actually being successful in life. If one is living a sattvic life, things just seem to come your way more easily.
That's right. That's right. You're right. Because it's all to do with energy. This world of manifestation has to do with energy. And if you generate the right kind of energy, you will pull the right kind of things towards you.
Yeah. And not only your sort of physical or psychic or emotional energy, but I think just there's an intelligence in nature that orchestrates the universe. And if we align with that, then you get the parking place, you get the green light, and many more, much more significant things just kind of help you, which otherwise other people, they're always running into obstacles.
That's right. It's the grace of God, as devotees would put it.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
A good mind is really the grace of God. A mind which has turned away from good sanskars is bound to have this deviant, perverted ways of thinking and action, and it only harms itself. It's the sheer grace of God when you have a pure mind.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question that's not going to come up in the ordinary course of our conversation, so I'll just pop it in here. This is from Mohan Rao in Cookeville, Tennessee. From a Vedantic point of view, well, before I ask this question, let me just say that I've interviewed people who are mediums and psychics and things like that. And I've interviewed people who have had near-death experiences and past life memories and all that kind of stuff. Not that that's the ultimate reality of things, but it demonstrates in a way that it can actually be measured scientifically in some cases, that there is more to life than the surface value, that there's more to life, that when this body dies, there's something continues. And so that's why I interview such people from time to time. But his question is, from a Vedantic point of view, what are your thoughts on mediums, psychics, and connecting with people on the other side?
Well, from the Vedantic standpoint, see, there's no other side.
Right.
And because when they don't give that importance to individuality or the person itself, there's no question of the other side. But let me tell you this, that the human unconscious and even the human subconscious, that itself goes so deep that a whole lot of these experiences, I don't say they are unreal or untrue or anything like that. They can happen in any life which has found a way towards that, which has removed the blocks which make us unaware of this particular, you can say, the source of your mental thought process. So those who have found a way to that can become mediums and psychics. And in fact, there are people who have done a whole lot of good things by becoming that, like Edgar Cayce, for example.
Right.
So all this is very true. It only points out to the depths of your own mind. But it is only when you step into pure consciousness or awareness that you give mind its place. Until then, all this is very real and it holds. And in fact, you will have to pass through a whole lot of all these mental processes before you arrive at realization. In yoga, they are very clear about this. A whole lot of vibhutis can come to you. And this acute sense of perception,
Vibhutis means what?
Sense of perception. Vibhutis are different powers, actually.
Oh, cities.
Yeah. Different powers which are not normal.
Right.
And very enhanced perceptions. Augmented perceptions, you can say. All these are part of the spiritual journey according to yoga. Not that it comes into the life of every spiritual aspirant, but you must not get sidetracked by these. That's the whole point. If you want to achieve the goal of just want an answer to who am I, you must focus on the I sense in you. And not what your mind is doing or what came up or what light you saw there. And you'll see 100 things, because whatever gets touched by clarified awareness will become very bright and effulgent. And it appears like an ineffable experience. But you should not, you must rather ask who's experiencing it. That's the only way to go into the source of your being. So all these things have to be put aside when it comes to a real Vedantic inquiry, but not that they will not come into the life of a spiritual aspirant.
Right.
I can tell you that.
Yeah. So you just said at the beginning of that, from the Vedantic perspective, there is no other side, but Vedanta is Anta. It's the end of the Veda. And there's also the Vyavaharika Satyam, transactional reality level of things. And that has its relevance. I mean, we could also say that from the Vedantic perspective, there is no hunger, or there is no war or anything else, because there's actually nothing. But hunger needs to be dealt with, and war needs to be dealt with on its own level.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
See, many people, they confuse the way and the goal and talk in the same terms regarding both. But let's be clear about this, that when what we are speaking, see, I think Vivekananda put it in the best possible way, that religion, actually spirituality, is about manifesting the divinity within, which is already there, and bringing it out, bringing it to the forefront. And do this by any means, he said. Work, worship, psych, control. These are all the yogas, you see. Yoga will lead you to Vedanta. And you just stick to your method. And it can be a mixed path also. Like you can be using many yogas to move. And yogas are the constitutional necessities of our being due to our present identifications. So you can't dispense with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these different things, right? There's yoga, and there's bhakti, and there's Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga, and all these different things. And it seems to me, I can't think of very many examples of anyone who is so exclusively engaged in any one of those that they're not also somewhat engaged in the others. So
that's right.
There might be a preponderance of one or the other, but most people, it's you have a toolkit with many tools in it.
Yeah, because you have all these faculties in yourself. And how can you put them aside? You are a thinker, and you are emoting, you are an emotional person, you have a propensity towards work and action. So you have a tendency to meditate. So you have all these. So it's a constitutional necessity that you adopt every yoga.
Yeah. But perhaps we might say that underlying all the different yogas is a common denominator, which again is pure consciousness. And if one can take recourse to that, in addition to whatever mode of activity you engage in, that will render the activity more fruitful.
Yes. The idea is that should dominate our thought process. You see, you take up a method, but it's a method towards this.
Right.
And in fact, the method itself is being illumined by this. Finally, you understand that you are the goal you were seeking. That Rumi's statement, I knocked and the door opened, and then I realized I'm knocking from within.
That's great. I heard you mention in one talk the 3 conditions of sadhana: purity, patience, and perseverance. And we've talked quite a bit about purity already, but let's talk more about patience and perseverance.
Yes. Without patience, I think you go nowhere, because these things take time for you to overcome the wrong kind of conditioning which you already have, to build the right sanskars, the building blocks, and then to concentrate, to build focus in your system. It takes time. So patience must be there. The problem lies here, most people, especially youngsters, they are taking up methods for a few days. So I was telling them that story of Sri Ramakrishna. You see that you start digging a well, and then you go to 3-4 feet, and then you don't find water. Then you start digging in another place. Again, you go only to 4 feet, and then you start to take up a third place. That's no way to find water. You must dig in one place only. And for that, you require patience, obviously.
Yeah. And perseverance.
Perseverance. You require the grit.
Yeah. And in my own experience, anyway, I mean, I was a very flaky guy. I dropped out of high school a couple of times and was very inconsistent and all. But when when I finally learned to meditate when I was 18, it was so gratifying and so beneficial from day one that
Right.
I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but in fact, I haven't missed one ever since then, 54 years. It just, it didn't take a lot of discipline. I wasn't a very disciplined guy. It was sort of just so rewarding that I look forward to it.
You had the sanskars, Rick. That's
I
why
guess.
you found it like that. Yeah. That's right.
It just clicked. In any case,
Yeah,
now,
actually, it's such a liberating experience for the mind, one bout of real meditation, and you'll know it's the sanest state of existence.
yeah, it was such a relief.
Exactly.
And so when we say patience and perseverance, it sounds like we're having to go through this arduous, sort of boring, and I got to keep doing this thing. But it's a lot. It can be a lot easier than that. It's rewarding all the way along the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
When you have similar company, it's all the more
Very
beneficial and
important.
encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I first learned, nobody around me was interested in it. And I was in this place that was very busy with kids and dogs and music. And there was a tree house out in back, and I used to go up into the tree house and to do my meditation, kind of at the edge of the woods. Here's another one. There's all these gems, which are traditional Vedantic gems, but I want to touch upon them as we go. The fourfold qualifications for sadhana without which you should not embark on reading Vedanta: Viveka, Vairagya, Sadsampat, and Mumukshutva. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, see, they are pretty obvious actually. If you think Vivek is to do with philosophical discrimination, and which means you are able to clearly analyze what actually gives you happiness and what doesn't. And the nature of life experiences, you are able to clearly analyze them. And then Vairagya is, the nature of our mind is it can be pursuing something which is fruitless just because it's habituated to do that. So when you show a certain amount of indignation towards such activity, then it's called Vairagya.
Indignation or dispassion?
Yeah, dispassion, but that the expression of the dispassion can be a sort of indignation, which means what I mean to say is the nature of our mind is it can be pursuing something which it knows is fruitless just because the habit, the tendency is there.
Right.
So closing the gate to this is Vairagya, which means you develop a sense of dispassion or dislike, indignation towards this kind of activity, which is outward bound. Which
like if you, let's say, have a cigarette habit or something, you
show a bit of anger towards it, and it's Vairagya.
Yeah, even disgust, perhaps, like, this is yucky. Don't want to do this.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Your mind will naturally do it if you have that Vivek, because that's the cause and this is the effect. Each of these four are like that. Please see this. And then Shat Sampati are a group of 6 qualities which are very essential for a steady mind. It includes Shama, Dama, Upariti, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhan.
Might be worth going through those.
Yeah. Shama is actually deep calmness of mind. Dama is the control of sense organs. See how important all this is? As long as they are rushing towards sense objects, no control of mind is possible. So Shama, Dama, they go together. Uparati is your ability to turn away from objects which divert your attention. Your ability to move away from that. Rati is attachment. Uparati is you turn away from that. Detachment, you can say. And Titiksha is great forbearance. Ability to bear with all the different conditions, circumstances of life. In places like Delhi and even here in the Himalayas, we get to practice natural titiksha because the weather's like that, the pollution levels can be like that you simply have to bear with it in order to keep a very stable mind and do what you can to continue a normal life. without getting depressed, without reacting abnormally. So titiksha is very important. And then you have shraddha, which is astikya buddhi actually, a positive state of mind which helps you absorb the best in every situation. It helps you absorb knowledge.
Sometimes Shraddha is defined as faith. Is that?
Yeah, faith, but Shankaracharya defines it as astikya buddhi, which means a positive frame of mind, which can accept the reality around you, the truth of things. And then samadhan is focus, ability to concentrate, which means you have a very steady mind. So these are sixfold qualifications, which are the Shat Sampati, 6 treasures. And mumukshutvam, of course, is your hankering for liberation, which means an unconditioned, uncluttered, pure state of existence, which obviously all of us are hankering for.
Yeah. And these are said to be qualities without which you should not embark on reading Vedanta. But obviously all of these things grow. There's no end to their possible growth. And so you're not going to wait until you're perfect in all these things, because that'll never happen. So, would it be true to say that if you are attracted to reading Vedanta, you might as well start doing it? And that perhaps indicates a certain degree of development of all these qualities?
Yeah, the very fact that if you are deeply interested in Vedanta and you are doing it by default every day, on an everyday basis, then it means you have these qualities in some measure. And you can, of course, always improve and further increase them.
Yeah.
Because without Vivek and Vairagya, why at all would you come to spiritual books? Tell me.
And and so I guess to wrap it up this point, if you feel inclined to do anything along these lines, read Vedanta, great. But you'll find that your success with it and the benefit you derive from it will grow as you develop these other qualities. And so,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
In fact, if you make a habit of karma yoga and serving others, a whole lot of these qualities spontaneously come into you.
Yeah, Swami Sarvapriyananda was telling a story the other night about these monks in one of the it was a hospital that was run by the Vedanta Society. Is the Vedanta Society the umbrella organization, or is that just sort of one thing under a bigger umbrella? What do you call the overall organization?
Actually, it's Ramakrishna Math and Mission, and the Western centers are called Vedanta Societies.
I see. Okay, good.
Yes,
so there were a couple
we are the women's monastic group, which is actually independent of, administratively independent, but ideologically it's the same. It's the women's wing of the Ramakrishna Mission. Yeah. Good. Sarada Mission.
Yeah. So anyway, these couple of monks were taking care of all these people in this hospital. And I guess a lot of the people were older monks and all, and they were changing bedpans and doing all this dirty work. Right, and some people were criticizing them. You guys are monks. In fact, they called them some derogatory term. I forget what it was, because they spent their whole days doing this stuff, which didn't seem very Vedantic. But then they would spend their evenings in samadhi, because the karma yoga they were doing was so purifying that it would set them up for that. True. Yeah.
Swami Turiyananji Maharaj had said this, that just 3 days you serve selflessly, and I assure you, you will have deep meditation, samadhi-like state.
Yeah.
Just 3 days of selfless work.
And what do you think are the mechanics of that? Why is that so?
That is so because, you see, ultimately, it is our sense of individuality or ego that prevents the ultimate plunge into pure consciousness. So in Karma Yoga, I'm really telling you, it's the best way to purify yourself. You just keep doing good to others, gladdening other minds without any expectation or anticipation of benefit for yourself. And what will happen by that is this sense of ego, which is falsely identified, will drop by itself. ultimately, that is the big block, the barrier for self-realization, isn't it? So that is obliterated naturally in Karma Yoga.
And we talked about this earlier, but I've heard Karma Yoga defined as being not merely action, but action in a state of yoga. So like that, chapter 2, verse 48 of the Gita there, established in yoga, perform action.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's this depth to it. It's not just frenetic service, because sometimes people can burn out doing service. That's a problem with, Doctors Without Borders and people who are trying to help in various capacities. They get burned out. So if you can sort of take recourse to the self throughout, on a regular basis, then you have a foundation. Yes,
in fact, the extent of your selflessness means that the genuine feeling of not I in the actual act will only come to the extent you are established in the real self. Yeah. So then that makes you naturally selfless. Then whatever activity you do naturally becomes karma yoga. Mm-hmm. So that state will naturally lead you into spiritual liberation, isn't it?
Good. Another question came in from Kanta Dadlani in Bombay. Not everyone is able to master the scriptures as wonderfully as yourself and Swami Sarvapriyananda. Can one still walk the spiritual path without having to learn the scriptures by heart?
Yeah, of course. See, if you have been listening to this interview from the beginning, I told you that you're better off, in fact, if you don't have a whole lot of the burden of a whole lot of thought processes in your mind. If you just know the goal and you are able to manufacture an uncluttered, completely clear, pure state of mind, that'll take you closer to the goal than any scripture. Because finally, it is your awareness that has to come to the forefront. I'm again repeating, it's an unfoldment, a transformation of your own consciousness. And nothing can do it for you if it doesn't happen within yourself, by yourself. So it's okay if you don't study the scriptures. The only thing which Sri Ramakrishna recommended for spiritual aspirants is a burning desire to know the truth. Where if you're a bhakta, you will say a burning desire for God. If you are a yogic type, you will say to unfold higher awareness. If you are a jnani type, you will say to know Brahman, whatever you call it. A burning desire to transcend this limited level of existence and go into our original state of pure bliss. If that hankering is there and the conscious mind is fully doing this, able to do this, then that's enough qualification to go into higher states of samadhi and all that. It's not mandatory that everybody should know the scriptures. In fact, people ask me, then why did you study? If you say this, then why at all did you dive into the scriptures? Or why did you, even people ask me, why did you renounce the world? If you say that spiritual life only enhances life, why did you run away from life? But I'm telling you, we did not run away from life as you understand it. In fact, to have an over-cluttered, wrongly conditioned mind is renunciation. You have renounced the essential bliss of life. To have a pure mind and whatever is required for that, to go into that, is you can't say you have gone away from life. You have dived deeper into the real taste of life. By giving away the unnecessary things, the wrong attachments, the wrong conditioning, the negativity of life, by keeping a little distance from all that, you have gone into the rarefied state of your own being. How can you call that renunciation? In fact, Swami Brahmananji used to say that people who only indulge in sensual pleasures, they are the renunciants. They have renounced the essential peace and bliss of life. You must know how to live maturely, and that you will know only if you dive into awareness. If you bring your mind into your hands. Until then, you can't live maturely. You are just being carried away by different forces, that's all. And you're calling that life.
Yeah, let's say you're outdoors and it's windy and rainy and cold, and you go into the house. It's not like, and in the house it's nice and warm and dry. You're not renouncing the outdoors, really. you're going towards something which provides greater joy and comfort.
In fact, the people who initially told me that why are you taking up this kind of life, they are the happiest people today, you know. They are so happy. In fact, they tell me that if we had known this kind of a path was there for young women when we were young, we would have definitely taken it.
Let me give you a suggestion about your headset. You can tighten it up, you know, by sliding the bits together more, and so it actually rests on top of your head and doesn't fall off, and then you won't have to keep adjusting it. Try that.
Is this okay? It's rather loose.
I know. You see, take it off for a second. Well, you won't be able to hear me if you take it off, but it can tighten. There's a piece that slides together on both sides and gets tighter, and then it should stay on your head better.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah, is that better? Yeah, that should be tighter.
Yeah, this is better.
Good.
Yeah, am I clearly audible now?
Oh yeah, you were before, but you're having trouble keeping it on. So
yeah. This is really nice.
This
Thank
should
you.
help. Sure. Here's a follow-up question from Mohan Rao in Cookeville, Tennessee, about your analogy of digging the shallow wells or one deep well. Whether you dig several shallow wells or one deep well, are they not related to one's samskaras and one really has no control? Oh, in other words, he's saying, won't your samskaras sort of compel you to either dig a lot of little shallow wells or buckle down and dig one deep one?
Yeah, he's right. Actually, ultimately, no matter how much knowledge you have, your sanskars will dictate your life. Please see this. He's right in what he's saying. We always give the example of, Duryodhan on the battlefield of Mahabharat war. And when Bhishma is charging him and saying, oh, you idiot, it's due to you that the war is taking, and you don't know what you're doing. And it's you don't know the difference between dharma and adharma. And he says, Janami dharmam. Duryodhan says, Janami dharmam nacha me pravrittim, Janami adharmam nacha me nivrittim. I know very well what is the right thing to do, but I'm not able to do it. That's my problem. And I know what is adharma, but I can't desist from it. So this is the problem with the human mind. We may have knowledge enough, but no sanskar backup. So when you don't have a backpack of solid sanskars, impressions which impel you towards right action, no matter how much you know, you will only do the resultant of your net sanskars. In fact, you know how Vivekananda defined character? He said character is nothing but a bundle of sanskars. He did not relate it with the exact conscious thought process, the knowledge that you have. It's ultimately the resultant of your sanskars. And if you have not worked on manufacturing the right sanskars, no matter how much information you collect, you will only go the way your subconscious and unconscious impels you. And that can mean you can go anywhere. Unless you have consciously built these building blocks of great character, a pure sattvic life, inner clarity, and a kind of austere kind of life. So all this, if it can be brought into the youth, an inspiration towards all this, then I think that's a big way of making change. Because, as Abraham Maslow said, the only way you can change a man is by changing his awareness of himself. So yes, you will only dig as as per your sanskars and not as per the knowledge of geography you have there.
Yeah, but something you just said is the key to it, which is you said building better samskaras or something. And so that implies that we do have some wiggle room. We do have some degree of free will. We might be compelled by samskaras, but we're not in most cases, the vast majority, we're not like 100% compelled. There's some degree of volition. And, you know that nursery rhyme? I don't know if you know this in India, but row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Okay, so the stream is carrying you along. You can't do much about that, but you can row the boat and you can sort of steer it this way and that and avoid rocks and things like that. So you have a certain amount of leeway.
Yeah, you do. That's right.
Yeah, and that can make all the difference in the world. Exercising that leeway, and then the more you exercise it, the more freedom you gain, and the less, less a slave you are to the samskaras.
That's right. In fact, Vivekananda always said that you are the makers of your destiny.
Mhm.
He didn't say, well, it's all done and you only go by your the blocks in your subconscious. And no, you are the creators of your destiny. At any given moment of time, you have the choice to make the right decision. But why I'm insisting on sanskars is, see, even the act of making a decision, this is there in one of the books. I think it's there, right, in Signs of Happiness. How many things happen before you make a decision in your own brain? There are a whole lot of processes going on. I think there's a talk on determinism and free will, which is on the NRCVEE channel. So you can go through that talk. There I have given all the scientific analysis for this, that it takes so many processes before you arrive at a decision. And that's why you must pay attention to sanskars in the early years of life. Although, yes, that much of a little bit of choice is given to you at any time in your life. If you have the right sanskars, you know, your choice will work magically for you, your choices.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize that, because there are philosophers like Sam Harris and other people who argue that we don't have free will, and they go into all kinds of details about that. And it's not people's practical experience. I mean, most people feel they have some degree of choice. And I think that, you know, we need to, I mean, ultimately we could say God is doing everything or something like that, but on the level on which we live, you have to sort of live in tune with the reality that you're in, you know, and not try to sort of, what is that saying? Just, there's better is death in one's own dharma, because one can perform it. Don't try to perform the dharma of if you're true to what's real for you, and
very right,
rather than sort of transposing some other higher state and trying to live by that, then you'll progress.
True, very true.
Yeah. A question came in from Evie Chris in Ohio, which is related to a lot of things we're saying. She's talking about you know, maintaining the peace of the self in the midst of trauma. Can we somehow disentangle ourself, capital S, from the content of experience, and therefore allow the self to shine through and experience peace, even though we might be in the midst of traumatic circumstances?
Yeah, that's what essentially yoga is about, to disconnect you from the thought process. But for it to happen as an actual nervous disconnection, it requires practice. It's not, it won't happen just like that.
Right.
And,
like anything, you don't become an excellent violinist just like that,
right,
you know, whatever.
Right. It in fact requires long practice, and it is possible to keep distant from the body-mind complex. That's a possibility. So then the trauma doesn't exactly feel like you are experiencing the trauma. You just know that there are negative energies around you, but you know, here knowledge translates into power when you have knowledge through yoga. So then you have the ability to change that traumatic situation also through your positive energy. Knowledge at this level always translates into power, the ability to change.
Good. Well, hopefully, Evie, we answered your question. Okay, let's talk more about happiness. We talked about it a little bit in the beginning, and you wrote a whole book about it, which I listened to. I measure books in terms of how long they are. So yours was about 8.5 hours because I turned it into audio. And you had a lot to say about happiness. It's a great book. We talked about it earlier, and we talked about how most people think happiness is to be found outside them somehow, and yet ultimately it's within. There's a quote from, what is it, the Upanishads? Happiness lies in the infinite. There is no happiness in the finite.
Yeah. Na alpe sukham asti bhumaiva sukham, Chandogya Upanishad.
So what would you say to a person who said, well, you know, I'm happy when I play tennis. I'm happy when I watch a good movie. I'm happy when I play with my children. Those things all bring me happiness. Why are you saying there's no happiness in the finite?
Yeah, I also feel happy when I'm in the Himalayas. I feel happy when I'm in my room quietly. So see, mental happiness, the happiness we get from whatever objects and ambience and all that, that is to be distinguished from the happiness you get out of pure being, or what we call awareness. There are two types of happiness, you know, the happiness which your mind can generate and which objects can generate in your mind. You must have studied that ladder of happiness which I have given. There. See, there are different rungs of the ladder, you see. So you have the sensate level of happiness, then you have happiness born of thought, and then you have happiness born of intellectual engagement, you have happiness born of service, and then you have the bliss of meditation.
And then isn't it the Taittiriya Upanishad, which has that logarithmic scale of, you know,
in a slightly different way they are putting it. Yeah, that's right.
If you
kind
do
of
the math on
calculus
that,
of happiness.
it's possible the knower Brahman is like billions of times more happy than
yes, that's right. So if you check it out and see that when we talk of happiness, we are usually talking of one of the rungs of this ladder. And what the mistake we make is we try to optimize happiness only along that one rung. We don't climb the ladder. That's the whole problem. Only yoga, what yoga is actually trying to do is, it is raising the bar of happiness through awareness, through the influx of higher awareness in the mind. So they will tell you, you must climb the ladder. You can't try to optimize happiness on the first rung of the ladder and call it greater happiness. You can't do that, because you will see the more you must have heard of the hedonic treadmill. It's a famous concept in today's psychology. Yeah, the very nature of the happiness born of sense objects is that it, after a certain time, it will actually you will feel sick of it. Okay, well, you can try it out and see. Anybody can. It's open for experimentation. If say you drink every day for 5 days, or you party every day for 5 days, the 5th day you won't like it. So this is the nature of that level of happiness. So no matter how many objects you collect around you, you cannot maximize happiness in this way. But you can climb the next rung of the ladder, which means you try to develop thought and emotion to such a level that gives you greater happiness than mere objects at the sense level. Creative thinking, creative writing, you know, if you write a poem, you just suddenly feel so happy. And deep level intellectual engagement in some, even if it's a mathematical problem or a game of chess, or in anything that interests you, you see, it's a higher level of happiness. After the experience, you realize that my mind was so steady, and you enjoy so much more happiness. The happiness of creativity.
When the state of Israel was founded, they tried to recruit Albert Einstein to become its
first. I always give that example.
Oh yeah, you tell the story.
Yeah. And you see, he what he said, that presidentship is
they wanted him to be
president.
Come
and go,
right?
But an equation is forever. So I would rather invest in knowledge and in intellectual engagement than in ruling a country. See, this is what I'm saying. You can raise the bar of happiness through awareness. Higher and higher happiness is possible for you. But if you want to only maximize along one rung, you will go into depression. This is what the modern youth force is actually deluded with. You know, they feel that excitability mode and drinks and drugs and all these things will give them greater happiness. The more they collect it around themselves, the happier they will be. Now check out and see for yourself. They will only put you in the hedonic treadmill. That is the current theory of pleasure and even positive psychology, in fact. You know, initially they gave you, Martin Seligman gave you the equation H is equal to P plus E plus M, where P is pleasure, E is engagement, M is meaning. Happiness constitutes this, he said. But later he modified the equation. He said, no, it's called Parma, the new theory. It says that it's not to do with pleasure, because pleasure gives very little happiness. Beyond a certain point, it actually causes revulsion. But positive thinking and positive feelings give you genuine happiness. So Parma theory says it is positive emotion and engagement. R is good relationships. M is meaning. And A is achievement. These are the factors for happiness. So I built further on this theory by saying that awareness in the mind gives happiness.
Ultimately, yeah.
Which is a characteristic Upanishadic idea.
I was a student of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for many years, and he said some interesting things about happiness. One was that the expansion of happiness is the very purpose of creation. So yeah, that was a good one. And then that also everyone's mind, from the amoeba to the human being, has a natural tendency to seek a field of greater happiness. And
that's right.
And I kind of hook those two together. I think that it's that fundamental drive in creation itself, in the universe itself, to expand happiness that manifests in us as a natural tendency to seek a field of greater happiness. But as you've been saying, we get limited returns on trying to find it in sensory pleasures.
Yeah.
Some people say that,
marginal return.
Yeah. Some people say that the happiness we derive from external experiences is actually a reflection of the inner happiness, the way the light of the moon is a reflection of the sunlight. Do you think that's true?
Not that I think that's true. That's true because, you see, what is actually, if you study the epistemology, you will see that what exactly is happening is the gladness produced in your mind due to an object. It was generated, see, at least this much we can understand, that happiness here was a state of my mind, maybe stimulated by that object. But Vedanta adds something more to this. What it says is, somewhere you touched the essence of your being. You touched awareness. And you superimpose the joy you got out of that on the object. Your mind, you see, because it's tinged with Maya, it produces this delusive effect. You start giving credit to the object. Actually, what happened was, your mind somehow, due to the stimulation, due to whatever reason, it plunged within and touched the core of your being. So there was a spurt of joy.
So you're saying that, let's say, when you get a new car, somehow that acquisition is a catalyst for a momentary glimpse of the inner being.
Yes.
Okay.
Because your identity was deeply involved with the car. It's your car.
Mm-hmm.
And your sense of I there, somehow it sort of, you can say your mind reflected more of the light of pure awareness. So your mind gladdened. But you superimposed the entire experience on the car and gave credit to the car alone.
And then
this is the Vedantic understanding.
And then, of course, we know that happiness derived from those things doesn't last, at least not the initial degree of happiness that we get the day we drive it off the car lot. So explain again the mechanics of why the satisfaction diminishes.
See, now if you suddenly realized that that car was, it belongs to your son, not to you. Okay, suppose you suddenly realize that. What will happen to the happiness in your mind? What I told you was, your identity somehow generated the happiness because you started feeling it's my car. Now your identity does all these things. The ultimately whatever mental happiness you experience, it's a reflection, it's a shadow of that pure consciousness in a fairly clear state of mind. That's why it's feeling happy. But you manage to superimpose it on the object. Now, any object can produce happiness to you. Why is it that after a continuous period of enjoyment with that object, then you are no longer happy with it? Because happiness was inherent in your mind, somehow it leaked into that portion of your mind which gladdened you due to the presence of that object. But it was not dependent on that object, because after 5 days, the object will no longer make you happy. So it was a state of your mind somehow generated by the self. But the mechanism can only be understood in a state close to samadhi. How the mind becomes happy. And it is not due to the object. This is the delusive effect of Maya, that it makes you believe, because it superimposes. It makes you believe the object made me happy. It was an opening of your own mind to your own being. You discover it by yourself, because no matter how much theory I told you experiences in the first person always. You must get it by yourself.
Yeah, if it's true that it's our natural tendency to seek greater happiness, it's obvious how external experiences are not going to satisfy that, because you just can't keep buying new cars or having new partners or eating more food. I mean, there's a limit to what you can do in the external world, but there's no limit to the degree, to the clarity and fullness with which inner consciousness can be appreciated or unfolded. And so that alone can really gratify that. And because the happiness inherent in that is infinite, whereas the happiness in a car or whatever could never be infinite, that can really gratify or fulfill that natural tendency.
Yeah, I think we get a very good understanding when we see the lives of realized masters like Sri Ramakrishna, for instance. All the people who have seen him, and usually he was in the state of samadhi. As you know, all 3 pictures of Sri Ramakrishna are of him in samadhi. And you know how they have described him. One disciple actually describes him as his face appeared like a cracked melon. It was just radiating so much of joy and bliss that it stunned their minds. And when Sri Ramakrishna would be in bhava samadhi, everyone around him felt something of that bhav.
Bhav means, explain what bhav means.
Bhav means a very intense state of, you can't even call it elevated emotion. It's a transcendental state of emotional energy, which a person who has reached that state of samadhi attains. So it's a samadhi produced by intense bhav, by intense emotion, you can say. There is so much more. It's not just emotion. The word bhav has no English equivalent, unfortunately. But that state, Sri Ramakrishna would radiate such an amount of energy and joy, happiness, that all around him, it became like a mad mob, They all would, get infected by that joy and attain something of it and start laughing and ecstatic and dancing and all that. And people who saw this from outside, they would feel, what is this going on in this room? Have they drunk too much? They would feel like that. And once somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna that, what exactly do you feel in samadhi? And he said, well, would you understand if I say, if a fish is suddenly released from a small pot into the ocean, how would it feel? That kind of splashing, liberating joy I feel in samadhi.
You think that somebody like him, I can't imagine that when he went into samadhi, he was coming out of an ordinary state to begin with, the kind that the average person experiences. He must have already been in a very blissful, profound state. It's just that, he went into it. Well, you explain. What's the difference?
See, Sri Ramakrishna's state of normal consciousness was far from ordinary. Otherwise, how do you think a person would go into a state of samadhi just like that? At the least suggestion, he would go plunge into that state. And I can tell you this, that people who saw Sri Ramakrishna and his divine ecstatic state, could not understand it for some time at least. And those who understood it, well, they actually felt that radiance on themselves. And there are so many such experiences with Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, have you read the literature about him? Even the life which...
Some, but not exhaustively.
Yeah, I think you should read the literature brought out by Swami Chetananandji, Sri Ramakrishna and his Divine Play, these books. And please see every incident there. It's beautifully described in... just concentrate on one paragraph and you'll get a picture of the master's mind. There's something divine and far from our ordinary. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah, he was considered to be an avatar, right?
Yes, he lived in God consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
See, we don't exactly understand what the avatar's consciousness is like, but you can know it by the manifestation, by the kind of peace and bliss he radiated, and the people around him actually felt that. This is the litmus test of realization, that you catch something of it in that presence.
Yeah.
Like the Buddha, for example, wherever he walked, for a radius of about 2 miles, people could know the Buddha was around by the peace they felt.
Yeah, there was a saint. There's a verse in the Yoga Sutras about peace in the radius of a realized being, right?
Exactly.
And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's master, who was Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, he was Shankaracharya of Jyotirmath. When he was doing tapas in the forest, it was said that the animals wouldn't fight with each other in about a 2 mile radius of him.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah. I have another question about happiness. I wrote this one out because it's a little bit long. It's about distinguishing bliss from happiness. We haven't really talked about the kosha model, but you can elaborate on that a bit if you like. But the Ananda Maya kosha means it's a blissful sheath, but it's still a sheath. And it includes the word Maya, Ananda Maya kosha. And so as nice as it is, it's still a layer of ignorance, I guess. And therefore, would it be something which changes, I presume, and that which changes can't bring ultimate or lasting happiness. So when you speak of happiness, are you alluding to that which lies beyond that sheath?
Yeah, the ultimate bliss, of course, is described as belonging to the self, not to the Anandmay Kosh. Anandmay Kosh, here the Mai is not Maya. It is that sheath which is suffused with Ananda, joy, because it is closest to the Atman.
Mm-hmm.
Is the causal body. Anandmay Kosh is the causal body. And the rest, Vijnanmay Kosh, Manomay Kosh, all this come under the subtle body. So because it is closest to the Atman, it radiates a lot of the light of the Atman, which is bliss. So that's why it's called Anandmay Kosh. But
I see. So it in itself is not intrinsically blissful, but it's so close, like something that's next to a hot fire gets heated up. It's exactly close to the self. I see. Okay,
exactly,
good.
Exactly, something like that. So what they are trying to say is that awareness percolates into your system, and to the extent that these sheets or koshas are pure and transparent, the more awareness will percolate into the system. Awareness includes bliss. I told you it's synonymous with happiness and existence. They mean it's the same thing. They are not three qualities of the Atman. It's the same thing. You must understand it through the practice. That's why I'm saying you, and not intellectually. And then you understand it's the same thing. So to the extent these koshas are transparent enough, that much of light would stream into them.
Since we mentioned
and you
koshas,
can actually see this in a spiritual master. I can tell you this. Even a great sadhak, you can actually see it in his physical frame, the light he exudes.
Since we mentioned this, let's have you explain the Panchakosha model for a minute, just so we can get out as much knowledge as possible.
Yeah, Panchakosha model is a way of understanding the human personality paradigm according to Vedanta. So it includes the outermost sheath is the Annamay Kosh, which is the body. So you see, it's only the external crust of your personality. And then beyond that is the Pranamaya Kosh, the vital energy sheath. Then there's the Manomaya Kosh, the mind. Then there's the Vijnanmaya Kosh, which is the seat of your intellect and will. And the Anandmaya Kosh, which is the final sheath, which covers the Atman, you can say. But the actual core of your being is the Atman. It is the real you. And you, as it were, manifest through these 5 sheaths. But you must remember this, that traditionally in Vedanta, the Annamaya Kosh is the body. We call it the body. The Pranamaya Kosh, Manomaya Kosh, and Vijnanamaya Kosh together are called the subtle body. The subtle body. And then the Anandmaya Kosh is the causal body. So you actually wear 3 bodies, not 1. And as if 3 bodies are not enough, we have made a Shashtam Kosh also with our dress, with all the things we use to cover the body. As if this identification is not enough, we are identified with a whole lot of things outside the Annamaya Kosh also. So what we are trying to enhance our sense of personality through all this, but Vedanta will clearly tell you that you have to crack this personality paradigm, the Panchakosha, in order to know the self, which means Panchakosha Vichara has to be followed. Try to understand why you are not this body, why you are not the vital energy sheath, why you are not the mind. So the actual, I think you have already seen it in some of the Vedanta lectures. The Panchakosha, the Bhruguvalli, is about this, cracking this Panchakosha model, which means finding your way to the self by analyzing these 5 sheaths and seeing that you are not identified with them by default, but by choice. Check this out and see for yourself.
Interesting. I mean, obviously, there's 8 billion or so people in the world, most of whom don't even know that there are all these sheaths, and yet who are identified with them. And if they're identified by choice, that kind of implies that they could, if we tell them about this, they could say, okay, I choose not to be identified. But obviously it's not as simple as that. So what do you mean there?
No, what I mean by that is, see, why I say by choice, see, your body does not come and say I, does it? But you say I am the body.
Right.
What does this mean? See, this is Vedanta Vichar. Nothing in your body has self-awareness. It is, you see, all of your cells are conscious. They are doing their own thing. They are like a machine. They are manufacturing what they have to, but they are not self-aware. You are aware of the body is not aware of you. What does this mean? This means you are wearing the body. You are not the body. Self-awareness belongs to the subject, the supreme subject, and not to the body. You know, I always give this example to my students that suppose you have a stomachache, an external instrument like a CT scan or ultrasound has to tell you what is the problem where. You can't pinpoint the problem. That unaware are you of the body. You are not even conscious of the body until you are made conscious of it. And yet you say, I am the body. This is the mistake. The body is yours, definitely, but you are not the body, because the body never claims an I. Yet you say, I am the body. There is an I apart from the body. Please see this. Raman Maharshi would say, you see, your existence is evident with or without body, with or without mind. You must feel the truth of this in your own experience. Same thing with our thoughts, with our mind. I am aware of my thoughts. That's why I have memories. But my thoughts are not aware of me. They don't have self-awareness. So the subject is always, these are objective experiences for me. The subject is always apart from them. So this is Panchakosha Vichara. Like this, you can go till the Anandamaya Kosh. Everything is an object of your perception. Everything is changing in your perception. Everything is unidentified with you. And yet you claim an I over it. Although it is yours, it is not you. You say, I am this. This is the problem. Now, the truth of this can only be experienced through Vedanta. Only when it comes to self, pure being, there you need not claim anything there. You are just that all the time. That is not yours, it is you. Awareness is not yours. Please see, in this ultimate analysis, you cannot say my awareness. Pure awareness is you. The rest is yours. So this is Panchakosha Vichara. It will tell you, it will show you clearly that you are wearing these 5 sheets. You are not the 5 sheets. You are the self which dons these and manifests as a human personality. But if you identify only with this, you lead a very limited life of body consciousness, mind consciousness, that's all. That's why I told you, you are identified by choice and not by default.
I've heard you say that when we die, really all that happens is the Annamaya Kosha dies, the body, the gross,
Yes.
the physical meat puppet dies. And
Yes.
that,
The rest of you is carried on.
Yeah, right. So that's what reincarnates or goes to some loka or whatever happens.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what people experience. That's why I occasionally will interview someone who's had a near-death experience, for instance, or an out-of-body experience, because it's a practical demonstration of that fact.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. There are so many stories. I mean, I interviewed one lady who, when she was a little child, she fell into a tank of water and was drowning, and she left her body, and she saw the nanny in the house watching soap operas, and so she's now thought, I'm not going to get any help there, and so she went down the street and found her mother waiting at the bus stop to go to work, and she in her subtle body she said, "Hi, Mom," and her mom dropped whatever she was doing, ran back straight to the tank, not into the house, but straight to the tank, pulled her out and resuscitated her.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that kind of thing, those who think that we're only the body and that consciousness, or that there's nothing subtler or more independent, those kinds of things demonstrate that there are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Before we run out of time, this is something that bugs me, which I've heard you say, I've heard Ramana say it, many people say it, which is, and I put it in my notes that you've seen, and that is that the thing about experiencing the absence of objects during sleep. When I wake up in the morning, I feel I slept well, not because I remember having slept necessarily, but because, I feel so relaxed and rested. I must have slept well. I make that inference. Although sometimes I actually do this thing where I wake up and I think to myself, okay, stop being so lazy, get out of bed, you're awake. And I have this feeling like I've been lying there awake for a long time. But then I realize, wait a minute, I just woke up. I've been sleeping. And there was this sort of awareness somehow that I was awake, even though I was asleep. And this can get much more clear. I have friends, some of whom I've interviewed on this show, who, joke that they haven't slept in decades. And of course, their bodies have, but the inner awareness has never been clouded for a long, long time. But the question, to distill this down into a question, do we really remember the fact that we feel we've slept well? Is that really a proof that there was some awareness during sleep, or can't that just be deduced from how refreshed we feel when we wake up?
Yeah, this point has been, there's been a lot of discussion on this point, because this was the main point of opposition between the Nayayikas and the Advaita Vedantins. How do you say that you experienced absence of objective encounters in deep sleep when, according to the Nayayikas, it was an inference you're drawing after you get up? According to the Advaitins, they say, no, it was an experience of absence because the mind was shut down, and you record experience only through the mind. When the mind gets shut down, you don't have a normal experience, but since you say you had a restful, peaceful, happy sleep, state of sleep, who recorded that experience? Who felt it? See, but
maybe
if
nobody
you were not
felt
there,
it. Maybe you're just feeling it when you woke up because you feel so good.
No, but then how you would have said something like this, you would have said that, well, I slept and I got up. You wouldn't have said I had a restful, peaceful sleep, which substantially rejuvenated my energies and renewed my mind. You wouldn't say all this. You were there to detect the absence of objects. You were there to feel a deep restfulness. That's why it was an experience of absence. This is the kind of conclusion they draw. The only way to study this, the way Mandukya Upanishad is putting it, is to develop pockets of awareness in deep sleep. As you say, some of your friends have been doing that. A yogic state of mind will help you see the state of sushupti also objectively. And it is a
sleep.
Yes, deep sleep. So it is important. That is why I say to understand Vedanta while being established in yoga. If you don't have this yogic awareness within you, you will not understand, you will not feel or be able to objectively study Sushupti. If Mandukya Upanishad draws a statement like this, what does it matter to you unless you have felt the truth yourself?
Yeah.
That is why I say pockets of awareness, deep level awareness. Once you generate them in the meditative state, it not that you are, the effect of meditation lasts beyond meditation hours. Your awareness will remain uncontaminated by all the experiences of your life, and you will develop pockets of awareness even in deep sleep.
Yeah.
So then you will understand that you have experienced absence. And
not
it's
even
not
pockets.
Of
I mean, some of these people I'm referring to, it's been a continuum now in fact, some spiritual teachers hold that as a litmus test for real awakening, that if you're losing your awareness during deep sleep, then you are not there yet.
Let me tell you the Jnani standpoint. From the Jnani standpoint, there are only two states, no such four states of experience, which we usually say Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and Turiya. He reduces them to two. He says there is one state of complete awakening and one state of dream. And all your Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti are different durations of the dream state. Mm-hmm. From the Jnani standpoint, from Raman Maharshi's standpoint, for instance.
Yeah, I think Shankara called ignorance the long dream.
Yeah. And even in talks with Raman Maharshi or Nisargadatta Maharaj, you will find this. They consider all Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti, that is waking, dream, and deep sleep. It's only dream of different durations. And only the state of realization is the really awakened state, or you can say the really Jagrat state. And so there are only two states according to them. Because those who have not tasted of realization will consider Jagrat to be the awakened state, isn't it? The state of arousal. So you must increase your awareness. That's the only way in order to solve this problem. There's no other way.
Good. We're going a little long today because this is I consider this to be a wonderful privilege and opportunity to have this talk with you. I think Irene's preparing a few more questions to come over, but I have another one for you, which I've wondered about for years. I heard that Sri Ramakrishna pursued the paths of Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, and in each case arrived at the goal of each path. But that always puzzled me because he was already at the goal of all those paths. So how did he go through the path again if he was already at the goal?
See, his life was a demonstration of certain very important ideas which are required for, evolving humanity. It was a demonstration. Obviously, he was in an awakened state of consciousness. So it must have been easy for him to awaken to the truth of all religions. But he came to show that every path is valid. Every religion is valid. Everything is a very good means to the ultimate state of God realization. And nothing can be discounted, in fact. His famous statement, Jato mat tato pat. Actually, mat means not even faith, it means opinions. So as many opinions, that many paths, he says. Isn't this fantastic in today's world? Even to know this, that as many faiths, that many paths. And Vivekananda, in a very more practical way he put this by saying that every man has a religion in his own soul. And when you actually take to spirituality or spiritual practice, that path is uncovered for you, the way you will realize the supreme truth. And every such path is valid. The sanction is in your own soul. So then what are we quarreling about is something really I don't understand. I don't understand the fundamentalist philosophy, you know.
Yeah, me neither. I try to take a God's eye view of things.
Yeah.
And it's a big universe. In fact, on occasion, I've been confronted by fundamentalists, and I start talking astronomy with them, you know, and try to give them an idea of how many inhabited planets there must be in the universe. And, you know, is
That's
Jesus
right.
on tour or what? If he's the only savior. Here's a question that came in from Ravi Dadlani, must be Kanta Dadlani's husband or something. He's in the UAE. In a chapter of the Panchadasi, I think chapter 13 or 14, the emphasis is on how we can use everyday pleasure or happiness as a portal to Atman. Is this a legitimate method?
Everyday experiences of pain and pleasure.
Pleasure or happiness. Yeah, everyday pleasure.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose we could take eating a good meal or
eating a good
watching
meal,
a
for
good
example.
TV show. Can those be portals to Atman?
They cannot be portals to self-knowledge because they will keep your mind deeply engaged in the experience and will not allow it to transcend itself. But they will offer you clues like, where is this happiness coming from? Is it coming from that TV show or this meal? Or is it coming from a deeper source? They can lead you to this inquiry. But don't think they are portals to transcending mind, because your mind will be carried away at that instant. It will be carried away by that particular event. That is why you are engaging in it. So see, the very definition of yoga, why does it say chitta vritti nirodh? Why on earth should it say that? Why would you want to put down thought, which is, you know, the culmination of human evolution, your thought process? Why is it asking you to do that? So that you will get away from this conditioned mind, so that you will enter into awareness, and from there you view your thought process, or you think anything you want. But as long as you're mingled with the thought process, you will not be able to realize the self.
I can think of one example, a couple type of example. For instance, one time I watched Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, which is a film about the life of Saint Francis. And I just felt so expanded and elated from sitting there. I had to sit for a while afterwards. I couldn't get up. Or another time I put on headphones and I listened to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And I remember I just went into such a deep state. It was like as good as any meditation. So I think sometimes really
that's
profound
because you were
things
seeing the life of Francis, or the life of Saint Clare, or a piece of music like this. This can definitely put you into a very elevated level of consciousness, because it has risen from there. And not everything will give you the capacity to do this.
Yeah, I remember hearing stories of Sri Ramakrishna, that he would hear some noise in the distance or something, and it would put him into samadhi.
Yeah. No, see, in his case, because his consciousness was like completely awakened, the least suggestions would put him into the state of God consciousness. Well, in our case, we really need to cultivate the mind first, isn't it? It's pretty obvious. See, Sri Ramakrishna would ask for some sweet meat in order to come out of his state of samadhi into the normal state of consciousness, because his mind was used to that superconscious state. He would struggle to bring it down.
Yeah.
Our struggle is just the opposite. We are struggling to lift it up. So then, to a certain extent, you must put down that which attracts the senses, that which engages the mind, in order to transcend this level. Whether you call it renunciation, you call it yoga, whatever you call it, you must fundamentally understand the existential need to have a completely uncluttered mind. Then sadhana becomes natural to you. Otherwise, you know, it's an enforced something. Oh, why should I make my mind thought-free? Okay, don't make it thought-free if you don't want to. Nobody's like insisting on that. But if you want to be a yogi, then you will understand the existential need of your mind to do this. Then you obviously do it. You can stall the mind. You can't completely declutter it for a long time. So that's why the practice is important. Stick to the practice.
Yeah. And I should add that through regular practice, the mind attains a condition of unclutteredness all the time. I mean, usually it's like when I was a kid, it was like I had 5 radio stations playing in my head all the time. Just so much chaos. But, now the mind seems to be, I mean, still some degree of agitation, but a lot of times just very settled and things come up if they need to, but otherwise there's not a lot of extraneous.
That's right.
Clutter. Yeah.
That's how it should be, isn't it? So that our peace is, we're peaceful by our own nature.
Yeah.
And agitated always.
It's a very efficient way of functioning, because you burn a lot of energy with all this agitation going on. But if everything is settled, the physiology is settled too. Even if you're physically active, there's a state of repose within that conserves energy, and so you have more energy to channel into useful things.
That's right.
Yeah. All of our questions today are from Indians. Here's one from Kavita Vishwanathan in Dallas, Texas. Could you speak about the state where the yogic practitioner has not found firm spiritual ground? Alabda Bhumi Kadvam. That's the question.
Alabda Bhumi. Yes. See, not finding firm ground only means you have not completely separated from the thought process, according in yogic parlance. Because I told you the foundation of your thought is awareness. If you step completely into that awareness, you can see mind objectively. But for this to happen, somewhere that separation should have taken place, isn't it? Now, why doesn't it take place? Is only because of our interest in the thought process. It keeps us subtly engaged with the thought process, connected to it. So that is why Vairagya. Vairagya is not running away from things and family and duties and responsibilities. It is actually keeping your thought process at bay. That is Vairagya. When you know how to handle thought, how much to invest in the thought, then you are a true Vairagyan, a true renunciate, I would say. Because you actually cannot, what will you renounce? Your body depends on this existence for its own sustenance. Your mind depends on this, the subtle world for its sustenance. Where are you renouncing? All you can do is, by renunciation, what is meant is your ability to objectively see the body-mind complex. And this ability lies deep within you. Yoga is the means to bring it out. And if you don't attain to it, don't worry too much about the end result. I will tell you this, because if you follow the method properly, suppose you don't get the end result in the next 1 decade, you will get it after that. If you don't get it in this lifetime, you will get it in the next lifetime. But you have created the building blocks required for the yogic life. So no effort is wasted. This is there in the Bhagavad Gita in a big way. So your effort is carried on over lifetimes, and it's not easy to do this. And especially in today's modern lifestyle, where we are taught to be in the excitability mode right from childhood, it is difficult to stop the thought process just like that. But try it, and you will see it has innumerable blessings to your life.
Yeah, that verse of the Gita, no effort is lost, and also no obstacle exists, which is a good one, which means that really there is no obstacle which cannot be overcome.
Yes. Initially, I think what we should try at is to generate the yogic sanskars required for a continued, intense yogic life. This is very important. See, the difference between a yoga bhrashta and a jivan mukta lies in this. If you have enough sanskars for the higher life, you will magically reach there. Otherwise, you will become a yoga bhrashta, which means you couldn't find the truth in this life, and you just strove for it, and then you continue again in the next life.
Right. Which
So
is
that's
also
why
in the
this-
Gita, you know.
Yeah, this is also in the Gita. So
Yeah, you basically you pick up where you left off.
Exactly. So you employ this karma yoga, sattvic life, good habits, good tendencies to generate good sanskars, good exposures most of all, because today we have wide range of exposures falling on us all the time. So regulate a little of all this, and you will see you will have this natural tendency towards a very intense inner life naturally.
Yeah. And when you say just stop the mind, as you said a few minutes ago, that could be discouraging to people. But, you know, obviously one should seek out good instruction. And and as Jesus said, you know, seek and ye shall find. If you have the sincere desire for what we're talking about here, opportunities will present themselves. And
yes,
but you know, you're not just telling people to listen to this interview, sit down and stop their mind.
No, I see what I mean to say when I say that is, your awareness should come to the forefront, and your engagement with thought process, which many times is erratic, should go at least to the background, if not vanish. This state is so magical and so powerful when you are intensely aware without a deflecting thought process. This state is so powerful that you can achieve anything through this state. That's why I keep saying stop mind. What I mean to say is, I don't mean to, well, stop your life. I don't mean to say that at all. I mean to say, become more aware than identified.
Yeah. And it's not an overnight process, but just move and keep moving in that direction.
Yes, that's right.
Question from Sri Ram Ganesh in India. Is there some guidance on finding our guru?
Well, guru is very important, and you must find your guru, because all these new age people who keep saying, no need of guru, they don't know what they are saying, because, you know, one powerful mind can, you know, all the struggle you can put up for decades or lifetimes, maybe can cut you through all that struggle. Just one powerful mind. And you must go into the physical presence of your guru. That's why you must find one. And don't listen to all this that guru is not required and all that. In fact, the guru shakti, when you, if you intensely want the guru shakti to come into your life, you will find your guru, because his mind also is just waiting to give.
Unfortunately, there have been some so-called gurus who have misbehaved and have given gurus a bad name and disillusioned people, but there's still some good ones out there.
Yeah.
That's why I brought up this whole ethics thing in the beginning. It really bothers me when people abuse the trust of
the fundamental thing to understand in about spiritual life is, without purity, you can't go anywhere. Your mind will not remain in that clarified state where awareness will blossom if there is no inner outer purity. That's why we always insist on this. Even if you are a householder, a regulated life where you have not compromised on your essential vitality. You don't waste your vital energies on unnecessary thought and emotion. This is mandatory. A clean life is the best way to progress spiritually.
Yeah. Here's a question from, I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you say more there?
No, it's pretty obvious to the practitioner.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, yeah.
Question from Tammy Budesa in Mount Shasta, California. I'm having surgery soon, and I'm wondering, where does the witness consciousness go during general anesthesia? Since I am not conscious during anesthesia, does it not have anything to witness? Which is a very good thing, she says. She doesn't want to witness surgery.
No, the thing is, for most people, witness consciousness and mind, there has been no conscious separation of these two. That's why questions like these arise. See, let me put a counter question to you, that suppose you know the visible universe only through the Hubble Space Telescope. Suppose there was no Hubble Space Telescope up there. Would you see the visible universe? You wouldn't be able to. Because the instrument for seeing that was the space telescope up there. So also your mind is giving you your experience of life. When the mind is shut down, you may not experience life, but are you absent? Is the experiencer absent when the mind shuts down? You may not see experiences like in your state of coma. Actually, what the medication during surgeries does is it disconnects your brain and neuronal activity from having the, because it's an experience of pain, it disconnects you from that. But I'm telling you, who's the experiencer of this disconnection? You are always there, whether the Hubble Space Telescope is revealing the universe or not revealing it. Only thing is you use the mind always to have a concept of yourself. Now that mind is absent, so you don't have a concept of yourself. So you imagine you are absent. Please try to see what I'm trying to say.
On this point, I had a friend who has since passed away, but who was one of these people that was, maintaining pure awareness during sleep all the time. And that was kind of normal. But she said that when she had surgery, she lost it. And that surprised her because she was used to having it be there all the time during deep sleep, but not during general anesthesia.
See, general anesthesia puts you into very deep sleep.
Yeah.
So she can lose awareness at that time. But what I'm saying is here again, we are, when I'm using the word awareness here, it doesn't mean the Atman. It means the reflected awareness in your mind. Since the whole mind is getting shut down, that awareness also is lost. But are you lost is what I'm asking.
Right. Well, ultimately, we know that even if you die, you're not lost. So obviously during surgery, it's like
exactly.
know that to be indeed indestructible, by which all this is pervaded.
Yeah, actually, yoga works at bringing your unconscious and subconscious to the conscious level. Yoga essentially practiced will do that. So the intensity of your mental awareness will be very great through the practice of yoga. So it creates pockets of awareness even in states of deep sleep, in states of coma, all this, it can do that. And to the extent a yogi achieves this awareness, to the extent he becomes more and more deeply conscious of things. And he realizes that he is never absent. The instrument through which he is perceiving can be put down, which is what all this medication or coma or deep sleep and all this is what happens in those times. But that is not loss of consciousness essentially. I have seen this in some of elderly people who have Alzheimer's, and they may appear like they are in a completely vegetative state, but you don't know subjectively they are experiencing something. They are not able to articulate it or manifest it in any way, but the subject is very much there.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing called end-stage lucidity, I believe it's called, where someone who has been in a coma for a long time, perhaps with Alzheimer's, they all of a sudden, they sit up in bed, have a coherent, even if the brain is quite deteriorated, have a quite coherent conversation with the people in the room, and then lie back and die. It's like at the very end.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Interesting. Okay, here's one question, probably our final question. This is from Mohan Rao. He asked one earlier. Can you please comment on the concept of worship or praising God? If I am Atman, who is part of Brahman, then why should I worship or praise myself? Even having gratitude to myself may not make sense from this perspective.
Yes, but as long as it's only a perspective and not a realization, you must continue to praise God, because until it becomes a realization that I am Brahman and I remain in the state of pure consciousness always, you must understand that when you worship God, you are only worshiping the true self, the higher self. As long as you have not realized it, you must continue to perform that worship and not engage in, people, one of our great Maharajas used to say this, great monks of the Ramakrishna order, he used to say this, that people apply jnana to God and they apply bhakti to themselves, which is wrong, isn't it? You must apply the philosophical inquiry to yourself and devotion to God. So don't confuse these two. As long as we have not realized our true self as being Brahman, you must continue to worship God, whether it is the personal God or the Vishishtadvaitic concept of God, whatever. But your adoration for the higher reality should always be part of your mind and practice. And don't compromise on these things just because there is some idea of Advait Vedanta in your head. You know, as long as it's an idea, it's not true. It becomes true only when it's a realized something in your entire system has become like that. It's a complete realization in itself. So until it's only an idea, it's a cloud in your mind, it will be blown away by another cloud after some time. So please continue to worship God.
And
That's
even
the only way you
after,
can progress.
even after Brahman is realized, here's a quote from Narahari, who was a post-Shankara Advaita master. He said, duality is delusive before enlightenment, but
Yes.
post-enlightenment, duality imagined for the sake of devotion is more beautiful than non-duality.
Yes, yes. That's so beautiful. True.
That's a good one.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap it up. So I mentioned earlier that there's YouTube channel with lots of your talks on it. I'll provide a link to that. What other things are you doing that people around the world can plug into? Do you do any webinars or anything else, or should they just listen to your talks on YouTube?
We have a weekly live stream class on the Upanishads, which I have, well, just now I'm not doing it, but I will, we had been discussing Mundaka Upanishad, and we already had 5 sessions done. Actually, all the Upanishads, that's how they are being discussed every Sunday. But now, since I'm in the Himalayas, I don't want to go into discussion. I would rather want to meditate more. So I have stopped the classes, and they will restart in July. So anybody can connect to the live stream.
How can they find out about that? Can you send me information that I can put on your page?
Yes, I'll do that.
Okay,
I'll
I'll
send
put it on
you
your
a
page.
mail. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And the books I mentioned in the beginning, are those, I didn't find them on Amazon. Are they there, or how can people get those books?
Yeah, they are on Amazon India, actually. They are not Amazon Global yet. So you can get the books through the Samitis, the Sharda Mahila Samiti there, which is run by Mary Thamras. I don't know if you know her.
Send me a link to that also, and I'll
yeah,
put it
I'll
on your
Yeah,
Batgap page so people can get those books.
Yeah.
Okay. How would you like to end this with a nice little chant? Like,
well, which one would you like?
oh, you choose. Sure, that one.
Yeah. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, Mataji. It's really been a joy spending time with you, and especially since we dragged you out of meditation to do this.
No, don't say that. Let me end with a very beautiful quote of Raman Maharshi, because you like him so much.
Please.
He says, there is no mistaking consciousness when it is pure.
Nice.
Let's remember this.
Good. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's been listening or watching. And if you haven't been to the Batgap website, go there and explore the menus, and you'll see some interesting things, and including a schedule of who we've got scheduled for the upcoming weeks. So we'll be in touch, and let's do this again one of these days.
Maybe when I'm out of the Himalayas.
When you're back in civilization, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah. Have a nice day.
You too.